Welcome back to Kevin Told Reads. I hope you're doing well. Happy Saturday. It is Saturday Shorts, and today I've got some great ones from Louis L Amour. I figured I'd kick it off with Volume 2, Frontier Stories. So I picked 3 short stories today. We are going to migrate from short stories regarding cattle wars to the introduction to a new character, at least to me, Chick Bowdry, aka Tex. Charles Bowdry is a character I didn't even know existed, and now I'm enamored by him. And then we're going to switch gears and go to a young cattle puncher who made his way to Arizona, and he just can't seem to catch a break. Stick around. Man, I need a haircut. I need my ears lowered. I wonder if they said that back in the Western days. I wonder if they said that back in the West. I need my ears lowered. Huh. I'd be afraid, though. If I go in and get a shave, I'm afraid they Sweeney Todd me or something. Anyways. So before we get started, I want to give you some just basic fun facts about Louis L Amour. If you haven't checked out my video on why you should read Louis L Amour, you definitely want to. You can find that in my Why You Should Read playlist. But L Amour has said to have written over 400 short stories and over 100 novels, and I can attest he's written a lot. And when it comes to short stories, I'm slowly working my way of collecting all of his collected short story anthologies. And I come across books at used stores where I think I'm getting a novel, and it turns out to be a short story collection. And I'm not complaining because I think his short stories are great. Chick Bowdry is a character that I did not know existed until this week when I picked up this collection from Louis L Amour Volume 2 and just at random picked some short stories, and one of them turned out to be a Chick Bowdry. And he was an interesting character, so I did a little research, and yeah, there's multiple books that are short story collections that have the tales of Chick Bowdry. Chick's name is very interesting because he's a Texas Ranger, goes by Tex or Chick, but the Chick came from the fact that when he was in school as a youngster, there was already another kid, a bigger kid, that was named Charles and went by the name Chuck, and so Chuck was taken, so Chick just left it at Chick, and it's kind of stuck with them. The Law of the Desert Born, the first short story I am going to feature today, is the first graphic novelization of a Louis L Amour story. And there is a trailer for this as well on YouTube that you can check out. L Amour was a self-educated man who has written over 100 novels and sold over 300 million copies worldwide. And even today, Louis L Amour works are still in print and still read. I still think he's underrated and not talked about enough, but yeah, Louis L Amour is a very iconic writer. Growing up and throughout his young adulthood, Louis L Amour worked many odd jobs, from a seaman to a lumberjack and even a boxer. So get ready as we dive into 3 short stories from this collected short story works, Volume 2, Frontier Stories by Louis L Amour. So the first story we're going to dive right into is titled Law of the Desert Born. This is the first story in this collection, Volume 2, Frontier Stories by Louis L Amour. I didn't know anything about it, and lo and behold, if you saw earlier, it is the first story that was ever adapted as a graphic novelization of a Louis L Amour story. It was done by, I believe, his son had a hand in it as well in trying to get it going. And so I did watch the trailer online, did a little research about it. You know, it's very interesting. And in some of the books, including this collection as well, in the back, there is some artwork from that kind of graphic novelization. I thought it was really interesting. You get little bits and pieces from that book, and you can find the book, the graphic novel, you can buy it as well. And so let's dive right in and talk about the summary of this one. So we're in New Mexico. It's the late 1880s, and there is a horrible drought in the area. There's also escalating cattle wars when a dispute between two ranchers escalates, and a new sheriff by the name of Clyde Bowman takes over the town. Shad Marone knows to watch his manners. He is working for one of these cattle ranchers, and when he gets into a gunfight and ends up accidentally shooting someone who's related to the sheriff, that is when Judd, Clyde's brother, comes to town, Judd Bowman, and he's looking for revenge on Shad. And so there is kind of a dust up that happens in one of the saloons, and Shad shoots at Judd, doesn't kill him, but he sets out immediately on his horse out of town in a hurry, and knows that the sheriff and his posse are going to be coming after them. There's only one problem, though, as Shad's trying to make his way out into the desert. He wants to kind of see if he could test his will to survive against them. But the one problem is the posse has asked for the help of a half Mexican, half Apache man by the name of Lopez. And Lopez is a hard man, and Shad knows that he will not give up. And so that's the kind of the summary of this. It's definitely a tale of survival. So let's talk about what makes it an interesting short story. I liked Shad Marone. I thought he was an interesting character. I liked the story, the fact that it's kind of an on-the-run story. It's a story of survival. They're out there. Shad takes him through some really rugged landscape, the lava beds where there's heat. I really like that Shad is using some of his knowledge in this short story. You know, he has moccasins on him and that he puts on and shucks his boots because he's sure the boots will melt. The moccasins will make it easier on his feet. And so that's interesting. He also uses kind of the knowledge he got from some of the Navajo Indians in that area on where water could be, and that becomes especially critical in this story. I really like the fact that the posse is trying their dogged best to try to chase him down, and they're struggling. Obviously, Shad knows Lopez is on his tail, so it becomes kind of this escalated thing. In terms of rating and overall, I give this a 3.9. It's a good short story. It's very solid, entertaining. Less than 20 pages. It has really good elements, harsh reality, atmosphere, the setting, being on the run. It has some inner dialogue of Shad and what he's thinking. And I like the ending because it's a little ambiguous, but I understand why. It becomes a respect thing, and I don't want to spoil it and tell you why, but I really like that. I didn't think there had to be like this final stand or the final conflict for the short story to be good. I liked it in that regard. So that is my take for The Law of the Desert Born. I give it a 3.9 out of 5. And so on to the second short story. And so the second short story I read in this collection from Louis L'Amour was The Killer from the Pecos. And this is my first entry into a Chick Bowdry tale. And so a summary of this short story is we have Texas Ranger Chick Bowdry. He is on the trail of a bank robber and killer. This killer robbed a bank in Pecos, Texas, and shot the president of the bank and the teller, killing them both, and then fled away with over $6,000 in cash. And so Chick has followed this killer that has made his way from Pecos, Texas to New Mexico. And Chick finds his way into El Magre, New Mexico. It's a town like many small towns where there's a lot to be had, and there's a lot of insight and intrigue and different characters and a lot of layers to the town. And upon his arrival, Chick realizes that there is no marshal in the town, and he finds out that marshals are in short order because once they get the badge, they don't live very long. And so he meets a couple people and inquires about this burglar and killer and gets a lot of cold shoulders. As he makes his way into a saloon, he comes head to head with a man named Benelli, who seems to be kind of the boss hog around the town and is a hard man, and they kind of have a standoff, and lo and behold, Chick is handed from one of the selectmen the marshal badge, and he puts it on and deputizes himself right there and says, he's going to change some things. And while he's on his investigation, and this Benelli guy better shove off. And so that's not going to sit well with this gentleman. And so that is kind of the summary of this tale. So what makes it a good short story? Well, the action kind of unfolds in Almagre in a very kind of organic way. It's a lawless town in New Mexico, but it's a boom town that had a recent silver strike. The town is also controlled by some ruthless men and the Baron Benelli. Bowdry's pursuit of a killer from Pecos, Texas, in his investigation, he just, I guess, figures that if he's going to be in this town investigating, he might as well make a little money being the marshal. And he obviously is going to go head to head with Benelli, and that does happen. But there is some cool twists that also take place. It also includes a female character that I thought was interesting in Amy, and she has kind of a secret genealogy that definitely comes into this story. I love the climax and the explanation and details around how Bowdry kind of figures out who all is involved and who the players are, and not everyone is as they seem in this short story. In terms of rating and overall, I give it a 4.2. I think it's fast-paced, even for a short story, has great characters. Obviously, it's my first entry into Chick Bowdry. It's definitely a nice setup to read more tales, which I may have went on Thrift Books and ordered the two books that I found in my research that are collections of Chick Bowdry. I mean, allegedly I did that. I don't know. But anyways, Chick Bowdry, aka Tex, interesting character. I'm definitely looking forward to reading more from him. I really liked one of his sayings, even though I didn't really capture it as an excerpt, but he said at the end of the story that he is like a tumbleweed. He doesn't like to stay in one place, and I thought that was very interesting. He's definitely a character I could see binging through his tales. And so now on to the final short story for this Saturday. And so the third and final short story for this Saturday from this collection from Louis L Amour is titled The Drift. A summary of this short story: The Drift is about Johnny Garrett. He came from Oregon to Bar X Ranch in Arizona. He wanted to punch cows, and he is wanting to work, and he's very young and very ambitious, but he's definitely senses the harshness and all of the work that he's been given. He's definitely second-guessing himself. At least, though, there is Mary Jane, and she's very pert and good to look at. However, Smoke Lamson, the foreman, he's kind of a jerk, and he's kind of got it out for Johnny, especially ever since he saw Johnny and Mary Jane kind of talking to each other. Smoke doesn't want Johnny kind of, easing on into what he considers his possession. And so ever since that happened, Smoke has been giving Johnny all of the crap jobs. He's the one that has to go out on night and make sure that the herd's not out there breaking through fences. He's the one that's got to do a lot of digging, a lot of miles and miles of fence mending. And so Johnny is pretty much at his wit's end with this whole thing. It isn't, though, until he gets assignment on the outskirts of the ranch's property in one of the cabins out there, and as kind of a punishment, that he also uncovers and looking at kind of just creating a map and looking at the lay of the land and kind of just killing time, he comes upon some cattle rustlers. And so he takes things into his own hand, and things don't go as the way he wants it to, and I'm going to leave it at that. What makes this a really good short story is I think it takes a very simple premise, and it really does it really justice. Especially at the end, there's some twists that give it an extra punch, and I think that was really well done by L'Amour. There's definitely some interesting characters that come in the middle of the story and add kind of a mystique and dynamic of who you can trust. And I think that was interesting as well, especially after Johnny uncovers some things. I definitely connected with Johnny as a character. I think he's a very interesting character. And it got me thinking kind of retrospectively after I read the story, when it comes to Johnny and his kind of plight here of getting picked on by an older gentleman and a foreman all around a girl. I think that probably happened more and was more prevalent back in those times of younger kids being taken and kind of advantage for when it comes to doing their share of the workload. And so I did uncover one excerpt that I wanted to share. It's mentioned at the very beginning of the story and at the very end, and it's around one of the characters and what a piece of advice he gives Johnny. And he said, "Remember what I said, kid. Some of those high-toned gals were thoroughbreds." And then if you read the short story, you'll understand the meaning. In terms of rating and overall, I gave it a 4.1. I thought the premise was simple, but the twist at the end really made it more dynamic. I thought Johnny was an interesting character. I definitely thought his plight was very believable and realistic. And it's always over a girl. I mean, a lot of these stories are, you cannot have a good short story from Louis L'Amour without some kind of female character in there, whether they're a strong female character or whether they're a female character that is sort of annoying, or a female character that's there because there's multiple people coveting the person in that kind of regard. But it definitely gives some authentic ness to the short story, and I really enjoyed it. And so that, my friends, is my take for Saturday shorts this week. I had 3 good ones. I couldn't wait to kick off June on the Range, so I decided what the heck, and this Saturday went with some Western short stories from Louis L'Amour. Be on the lookout in the coming Saturdays, I should say, because I will be circling through authors Elmore Leonard and Zane Grey and reading some of their short stories. So be on the lookout for that, and I hope you all have a great Saturday. Thanks.